What's up developers, it's Dari here and welcome back to a new video where we're going to dive into sessions in Laravel. I recently started using my GitHub more and more and I was thinking about adding a repository for every video I create with a usage section at the bottom, as you could see on my screen, which will basically show you how the code works in text. If you are interested in this, let me know in the comment section down below so I can continue on creating content like this as well. Also, don't forget to give me a follow on GitHub. Whenever a user interacts with your web application, data needs to be passed to another view or controller. To do that, the data needs to be stored temporarily. And in most cases, it will be done in a session. The usage of a session is very important in web development because it allows you to store states between page requests. So whenever you store a value from, let's say, the products page inside a session, it can be accessed in, let's say, the shopping cart of your web application. Before we dive into using sessions, we got to take a moment to talk about the configuration file of all your session settings and drivers. If we navigate to the code editor, you can find them, like any other configuration file, inside the config folder in the root of your project directory. Right here, if you scroll down, you can see a session.php file. Let's open it. Now the first thing that you might notice right here is the driver right here, which might seem odd, but there are a couple drivers that you can choose from. The first one is the default one, which is file. What this will do is storing your session inside the storage folder. Let me open it real quick. Right here, the framework folder, and right here you'll see a sessions folder. Right now it's empty, but whenever you create a session, it will be stored right here. Today's video is brought to you by Cloudways, a managed hosting platform for your applications. Cloudways has enabled businesses to scale and reach new milestones instead of worrying about server hassles. With reliable 24/7 support, Cloudways offers complete peace of mind from server-level nightmares. Furthermore, its superior tools and works enhance your productivity so you can focus on creating incredible experiences with your applications. It's a fast managed solution for agencies, SMBs, and e-commerce businesses. What I personally like about Cloudways is their slogan, "Moving Dreams Forward." You can also decide to store your session in a secure encrypted cookie. For that, you need to change file to cookie. You can also store them inside a database. You can store them inside a memcached, a Redis. We got Amazon Web Services. We got DynamoDB. And lastly, you could basically store them inside an array. But for this episode, we're going to use the basic file. If we scroll down the list, you'll see a couple more settings that we got right here. Lifetime is actually a pretty important one as well. You can grab them from the .env file, and it has a default value of 120, which stands for the amount of minutes you want to hold your session. So in our case, after 120 minutes, so after 2 hours, our session will be deleted. Now the next one, which is pretty important as well, is the encrypt, because you can choose whether or not you want to encrypt your session data or not. By default, the value is false. But if for some reason you're working with sensitive data, you can set the value equal to true. But for now, let's keep it to false. Now, like I said, sessions will also be stored inside the storage folder. And right here with the files, you can define the storage path, which is framework/sessions. There is some more data right here, as you can see, but we have covered the most important ones. So I want to dive into the code and start working with our sessions. In general, a session allows you to save and retrieve data based on keys. So let's test it out. If we close off our session.php file and focus on the pages controller, we're going to work inside our index method. You can define a session in two ways. So let me show you the first method through the session vacate. Right above our view, let's say session. Right here, make sure that you pull in the illuminate support vacate, colon. And after the double colon, we got to define a method that we want to perform on our session. In our case, let's start off with the put method. This method accepts two parameters. The first one will be the key. So let's say variable key, comma, it will give me an error. And the second param will be the value, so variable value. As you might have noticed right there, we're working with a key value pair. So let's change it up to a value. So let's remove variable key and let's set it equal to single quotes and let's call our session a name. Then for the value, let's say John Doe. Keep in mind that you can also add multiple names right here. The only thing you need to do is to wrap your value inside a double set of brackets. So let's save our session and let's navigate to a view. My index method is connected to the index.blade.php view inside the views folder. And right here, we got to make sure that we print out our session. Now this can also be done with a session vacate inside our view. So let's say double set of curly braces, session, colon. When you want to retrieve your values from your session, you have to call the get method, which accepts one parameter, which will be the key that we have passed inside our put method right here. So let's say in single quotes, name. If we save it, navigate to the browser and let me open my local host and refresh it. You can see that John Doe, which is a session that we created in the /URI, has been printed out as well. Like I said, it should be accessible throughout our entire application. So let's navigate back to our pages controller, and right below our public function index, let's create another one. Let's say public function about. Then right here, we need to return a view. So let's say return a view to about. Save it, go to the web.php file because we need to create the route as well. So let's duplicate it. URI is /about, and the method that we're going to call inside the pages controller is about. We obviously need to create the view. So let's say about.blade.php. I'm making a lot of typos right there. And what we could do right here is to go to our index page, copy what we got, paste it in, save it, navigate back to Brave, and let's change our endpoint to /about. And as you can see, John Doe is printed out again. So we created a session inside our index method, and we're using it inside the about page. Pretty cool, isn't it? There are a couple other methods available that you can perform on your session vacate. We've already performed the two most basic ones, which is the get method to get data and the put method to store values inside our session. Let's take an e-commerce website as an example right now. You've probably seen that you can add multiple products into your shopping cart. This can be done with the push method, which allows you to push a value to an existing array. And I think that the best possible way to showcase this is through a DD. So let's go right inside of our index method and let's keep our session put name, which has a value of John Doe. I've got a question for you. Think about it. How would you add another name inside the name key? So let's say that we got a second name right now. Would you duplicate this line of code that we got and change the name? Let's try it to Mary Jane. And right below our session, let's create a DD. Let me hit enter right here. Let's say session : get the key of name, save it. That's not necessary. All right. Navigate to Brave. Let's go to the / endpoint. And right here, you'll see that John Doe has been overridden and the value is Mary Jane. So the second put method that we're performing right here has override the first name that we got. Right here, we got to make sure that we perform the push method rather than the put method again. The push method adds a value to an array. Right now, our first put request is a string. John Doe is a string. So we need to wrap it around a set of brackets. Let's do that. The value of name is equal to an array. Then if we replace put with push, save it, navigate back to Brave, refresh the page, you'll see that the output is an array with two values. Index 0 is John Doe and index 1 is Mary Jane. The next method that we can perform on this session is one that I've used a couple times before on this channel, and that's the has method. The has method will check whether there's a value set at the provided key. So if we navigate back and let's remove, well, we don't need to remove anything actually. Let's go right below our session push and let's create an if statement. Because inside the if statement, we're going to check if our session, : has a key of name. If it does, print out, so a DD, a piece of text of name does exist. Let's comment out the DD that we have. Save it. Navigate back to Brave. Refresh it. And as you can see, name does exist. And if we add an else statement, with another DD of name does not exist. Change the key inside our has method to age. Save it. Refresh it. You'll see that name does not exist has been printed out. We can also perform the all method. But before we do that, we need to create another session. Well, it's not necessary, but let's actually do it. Let's remove the if statement. Let's delete everything after push. Let's create a new put method right here. Let's give it a key of age. And the value is a set of brackets, 30, 35, 40. If we save it and uncomment our DD, we can perform the all method. So the session : all. We're going to get all values inside our session, so we don't need to pass in a key. And this is actually a pretty interesting method because it returns an array of everything that we got inside the session. It also includes values that are set by the framework itself. Let's navigate back to the browser and let's refresh it. And let me zoom out a little bit. All right. The first value that you see right here is _token. I think that this makes sense because it's the CSRF token that has been set. You will also see this back whenever you submit a form from the view and you print out the entire request object. Now the name is equal to John Doe, which is the name that we created right here. We got the _previous, which has an array inside of it. So if we open it, you can see that the previous page that we accessed is the /about page, which is actually pretty cool because this is how you return back to the previous page. The _flash has an array inside of it, actually two. It's called old and new. They're both empty, but you can store stuff like your flash storage in here. And the last array or the value that we have is age, which has three values inside of it, which is 30, 35, and 40. Now let's think about it. Let's imagine that age is replaced with product ID and we have three different IDs right here. You can simply loop over your shopping cart array and print out the different IDs. The next two methods that we're going to perform are pretty fun to use, which is the forget and the flush method. What the forget method will do is removing a previously set session value. Let's navigate back. Right below our age, let's say that we want to session, : forget. It accepts one parameter, which needs to be the key that you want to forget. So in single quotes, let's say that we want to forget the array name. Save it, navigate back, refresh it, and right here, you can't see name anymore. Like I've just mentioned, we've also got the flush method, which will remove all session values. So if we navigate back, replace forget with flush, which does not accept a parameter because it will delete the entire array. Save it, navigate back, refresh it, and you can see that our session is empty right now. The last method is kind of a weird one and I honestly have never used it before. If we navigate back and remove our flush method, navigate back, refresh it, you'll see an _token, which is a ID that has been set by Laravel itself. If for some reason you want to regenerate this, you can perform the regenerate method. Let's navigate back, let's say session : regenerate, save it, navigate back, refresh it, you'll see a different token, refresh it again, and you'll see another one. Alright, now that we've been over pretty much all settings that you can set for a session, let's focus on a more complex example where we save our session inside the database with a user authentication chained to it. Now before we do it, let's quickly talk about the different situations on when you should be storing sessions in the database. Whenever you want to combine session data with metadata, because you can track whenever and how often a user has logged in. But you should also keep in mind that the numbers of records can grow tremendously inside your database, which can make your site slow as well. And that's kind of overkill, right? I've already got my database set up, so pause the video and please do the same. The first thing that we need to do is to pull in our authentication scaffolding. Inside the CLI, let's navigate to the other tab. And in here, let's perform composer require Laravel /UI. This might take a second. All right, then we're going to pull in a UI. So let's say PHP artisan UI view -- auth. It's telling us that we need to run npm install and npm run dev. Let's do that. As you can see, my webpack compiled successfully, and let me actually make my terminal a little bit bigger. Alright, so what we can do right now is to basically migrate our tables as well. So let's say PHP artisan migrate. We don't need to create the migrations ourselves for our sessions because artisan allows us to generate one with one command. So let's say PHP artisan session table. Hit enter. This will create a new migration inside the database folder. In the migrations folder, and it's the last one. Right here, you can see a new schema with a table name of sessions. Before we migrate this table as well, let's just go over the things that we have right here. Every session has its own unique ID. Then you can set the user ID as well right here, whenever a user is logged in of course, but the value is nullable, so it can also be 0 or nothing. So whenever a user is not logged in, it still saves the session. Then we got an IP address right here, and this will be the IP address that you use to access this page. Then we got the user_agent. This will be the software that presents content for end users. We've got the payload, which is a text, and the payload is basically a portion of transmitted data. The last one is the last_activity. And I think that this one speaks for itself. It's just basically the last time a user had activity on your page. Let's put it into use. Inside the CLI, let's perform the PHP artisan migrate command. As you can see, our create_session_table has been migrated. Before we can actually save it inside a database, we need to change up our database driver. Remember in the beginning of the episode where I told you that inside the config folder, we got a session.php file. And let me scroll up, where the session driver is equal to file. Instead of changing it right here, let's actually close it off. Open the .env file, and at the bottom, let's create the session_driver environment variable, and let's set it equal to database. Now, whenever a user registers, we want to make sure that we save data of a user. Of course, I know that you can do the same thing with the authentication vacate, but you can save those values inside the database, so you still need to store a user inside your session. So what we can do is to navigate to our registers, open the auth folder, open the register controller, scroll down to where we create a user right here. Instead of returning a created user, let's replace it with variable user and set it equal to this piece of code. Then right below, we could basically say, well, session, : push. Inside the push method, we're going to pass in two params. The first one will be the key, which is the user that is logged in. Second one is a set of brackets. Hit enter. Then right here, we're going to say, well, the first value that we want is the name of the user, which we're going to grab from the data array that we have right here. So data name. And the second one is the email, and which is data email. You can't pass in the ID right here because the ID has not been created. It will be done inside the database. So basically after this line where we return a variable user. All right, my session vacate hasn't been pulled in, so let me do that as well. Save it, close it off. Inside the pages controller, let's actually remove all the session values that we have. Save it, navigate to Brave, change our endpoint to /register. Give it a name of John. Email is john@gmail.com. Let's give it a password. All right. Click on register. We are logged in, so we need to change our endpoint to /. And right here, you'll see our values. So our flash, previous token, and the login web. But the most important one is the user that we stored right here. So whenever a user registers, we have an array right here with name and email. So how does this look inside the database? If I navigate to Visual Studio Code and open a new tab, perform the MySQL command. So I'm using a database name of use Laravel _testing. then what we can say is select everything from the table's sessions. This looks pretty weird. Let's fix this a little bit. Let's perform an exit. Let's create a new model. Let's quickly create a new sessions model, which will grab the values from the database. PHP artisan make me a model called session model. We can't use the keyword session right here because it will be the same as the session vacate. Hit enter. Then inside the pages controller, we could basically say, well, variable session is equal to session model, pull in the app models, colon, all. So get me all values. Now we got to make sure that we actually set the database table because right now session model does not exist. So let's open our session model and let's say protected table is single quotes sessions. Save it, open the pages controller, and let's add variable session inside the DD. Save it, navigate to Brave, refresh the page, and right here we have an array. Let's open it. Let's open this one as well. We need the attributes right here, and inside the attributes you'll find the ID, the user ID, the IP, the user agent, and the payload, and the last activity, which will be the date time. This was it for this video where I showed you how sessions work in Laravel and how you can store them inside a database. For now, this was it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you actually did, then please leave this video a thumbs up, and if you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button.